going to be recorded, and we'll make that recording available to everybody through the usual channels afterwards, probably later today. And so that if you know somebody who wants to see it or you want to share it with somebody later on, that will be available. This is Micah Cutler. I'm the secretary of the IGIC organization and one of the people that helps put together these lunch and learns. Today we have Craig Best with the US Census, and rarely have we nailed it so well on a timely topic. So, wow, kudos to us. Craig, how long have you been with US Census?
37 years.
I knew it was a long time. Even that kind of impresses me, actually. That was a little longer I thought. I would say those of us that have been in the Iowa GIS community, when you think of the census related, especially here in Iowa, Craig's the name that always pops into my head for sure. So he's going to be talking to us about the legacy data and updates with Census 2020, which I'm sure has been unlike any other census he's ever done before. I'll let Craig give any more background information he wants. And for those that just joined, we are going to save questions for the end after Craig's presentation, and we'll compile them all and make sure everything gets answered. So go ahead, Craig.
All right, thank you. Let me share my screen and PowerPoint presentation real quick. There you go. Yeah, thank you, Micah, for inviting me and that introduction there. This is my fourth census, 2020 census was. And if you're wondering, no, there will not be a fifth census in my future. But it's been a great ride so far, and you know, I enjoy doing these kinds of workshops and talking about products that are available. Obviously, if you all had seen in the newspapers, there's this COVID thing going on. Had some pretty significant impacts on the Census Bureau as well. This product was going to be released many months ago, was the original plan. COVID delays resulted in this thing being released in mid-August. This, well, I'll talk a bit more about it in a minute, but there is another release of this data coming at the end of September. So I'll talk a little bit about that as we get into the presentation. Anyway, let's get started. We're talking about quote unquote the legacy data. So what exactly am I talking about, legacy data? This release, which occurred last week, is the 2020 Census Public Law 94-171 Redistricting Data File. The Census Bureau is required to provide data to the states for redistricting based upon this Public Law 94-171. And this is the release of that data, the first release of that data for this census. This legacy data, quote unquote, includes population and housing unit counts for standard census tabulation areas, which includes state, county, city, census tract block group, tabulation block, your townships, your school districts, your state legislative districts, your congressional districts, and so forth. Those are all tallied up in this file. But the data itself isn't the legacy. It's the format of this data that is the legacy. This format has been used going back to the 2000 census. So the data you're seeing, we're going to show you today in this file, is the exact same data that will come out in a more user-friendly format in late September on the data.census.gov site. So this data is still good, but it's in a format that could take some software and some special handling in order to use it, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate for you today. So the subject content of this data set, as I mentioned, are the geography. So all the state, counties, cities, blah, 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 blah. You can read them all there. There's a total of 85 different geographic areas for which data are produced. There are 6 data tables available along with this data. There's a race table, Hispanic or Latino and not Hispanic or Latino by race, race for population 18 years and over, Hispanic or Latino and not Hispanic or Latino by race for population 18 years and over, group quarters population by major group quarters type, and finally the occupancy status. Now, these may not be categories that are specifically of interest to you, but it's geared towards that Public Law 94-171 legal requirement. So the states actually have determined, based upon the redistricting needs, what the data content is for this particular release. After the end of September, there will be additional tables of data made available from the 2020 census. But this is what's available now. So if you take one of these files and you dump it into a notepad, this is what it looks like. Just a long stream of data. This is a pipe delimited file. And if you start processing the pipes to delimit the data and look at it in a little bit more manageable format, it starts to make a little more sense, looks a little bit more like data. So this is an ASCII pipe delimited file. And if you didn't know how to get to the pipe button, you hit the shift and the bar button there right above the enter. And that's important when we get to the point where we import the data. So knowing where the pipe button is. Hopefully this is something you've done before, but if not, don't be scared. We'll get through it. So a couple things I want you to know. If you want to write down a couple notes, I appreciate the program's being recorded. The best place to get to where I'm going to show you files are located is at the Census Bureau home site, www.census.gov. And right now you'll see a kind of a green banner there near the top of the page, 2020 Census Redistricting Data now available. So if you click on that, it'll take you to the page that I'm going to show you part of on the next slide. So remember anything, go to this website, click on that link, and partway down that page, you will see the information that I've screenshotted on the right side of the screen there. So for the presentation that I'm going to do today, you need to get 5 items downloaded from this site. And I'll go into these in detail on what they are. First, identified there as number 1 on the right is the actual redistricting data summary file. It's a zipped file by state. So there's a separate file there for the state of Iowa. Number 2 is the technical documentation. I know a lot of people that are probably good GIS people hate reading documentation. I am also one of those. But you know what? It's going to be required for using this data. It's a 247-page document. I'm not telling you to go print it, but it's certainly something you want to have handy. It's a PDF file that provides you information. Number 3 is how to use the Microsoft Database Shell Guide. And that's the guide, kind of a step-by-step to do what I'm going to show you. 4th is the Microsoft Access Database Shell itself. I'm going to use Microsoft Access for my demonstration today. And item 5 is the frequently used SUMLEV codes. And again, I'm going to explain what these things are as we get into it. One other quick note on this page, on the right side near the bottom, you'll see that little black icon for a video, how to use the Microsoft Access Database Shell. So just keep that in mind, and I will come back to that. If you have a camera or something, want to take a screenshot, this might be a good one to remember. Because I think get to the page, get these files, and then you'll be in pretty good shape. So number 1 was the actual data file itself. As I mentioned, each state, when unzipped, contains 4 separate data files. And the Iowa files are shown in the bottom right there. Notice that the first 3 files begin with Iowa, IA, some zeros, and you'll see a 1, a 2, and a 3. Those are files 1, 2, and 3. We'll talk about why those are important shortly. And my favorite file is, of course, the geography file here at the bottom. The geography file is, again, my favorite file. It contains all the geographic codes and names. So if you want to use any of these data files, looking at any of these tables I talked about, you have to go through the geographic header file. It'll be your way to identify the geography for which you want to collect the data. You'll notice these files have a file extension of .pl. For the purposes of using Microsoft Access, you need to add a .txt onto the end of that file. It'll complain about changing the file type, but just accept yes to make that change. Now, files 1 through 3 contain those additional tables that I talked about earlier. There's 300 cells of data, a little over 300 cells of data for those 6 tables. The only file we're going to use for my particular presentation today is that geographic header file, but I'll show you a quick demo of the other files as well. Now, this is where it gets an important point that I have to stress to you. I'm going to show you how to drill down to the files you need. Realize, I believe Iowa has about 283,000 records of geographic data, if I remember my numbers correctly here. There are a total of 400 cells of data between these 4 tables we're going to import. So we're talking, 100 million cells of data. I'm guessing you don't want all those cells of data, so you're going to use the techniques I show you to drill down to just the pieces of data that you need. The technical documentation, as I mentioned, keep a copy of it handy where you can get to it. It includes the file structure of all these different files, the data dictionaries, the complete summary level hierarchy chart, and the list of tables. So if you want to figure out, how to pull out the housing table, you can go into this document. It'll tell you what file of the 3 the housing data are in and which fields of data in that housing table that you might be interested in taking a look at. Third is that how to use Microsoft Access Data Shell Guide. And this is actually very, very good. Step-by-step process for importing the file, which is what I'm going to demonstrate to you. I mentioned that video also that's available from the that previous page. That's a YouTube video, and it is, I think, very good for showing you, again, step-by-step what I'm showing you now. So those are very, very good tools, I think, for helping this all make sense to people. Number 4 is that Access shell itself, with the Microsoft Access table that I'm going to open up and show you. There is already files in that, or I should say tables defined in that for the 4 files that we're going to import for Iowa. And for each of those tables, of course, you can see on the right side, the geographic header file. It's a little more readable as you look through that, but it shows you how the fields are broken out. And that's important because you want to get all this raw pipe delimited data into the right format, into the right table. And obviously that's critical. With Access today, I'm going to import and format the raw data. I'll show you how to do some simple queries, and then we'll view the results and export to a spreadsheet if we want to do that. 5 is the summary level codes, the SUMLEVs. And here's why that's important. I mentioned that there's, 250,000 records in this geographic file. Okay, but what if you only want places, only want cities? Well, Iowa has around 1,000 incorporated places, I believe, throughout the state. So if I query based upon SUMLEV 160, if you see from the table at the bottom, you look down to where it says place, and across to the right, it says SUMLEV 160. So if I do my query based upon SUMLEV 160, I'm going to get just 1,000 records for the state of Iowa. Pardon me here, I included some old content from a Rhode Island file that I was looking at. So the Rhode Island data and the number of records I get with my query is 15 records. It was based upon that Rhode Island file. For Iowa, we're going to get around 1,000. Now it's important because you expect about 1,000. If for some reason your query brings up 10,000, you better take a look at your query because you probably have too much data. And some of the ramifications of that, if you start summing fields of data in that query, you could be duplicating the population count and getting erroneous results. So this document, I actually printed out myself and have a copy of it. So this is probably the third important document to have available to you. You can see down at the bottom, census block. If you want a record for the population of each census block, it's summary level 750. As I mentioned, these are large data sets. And by large, I mean they're really, really big. As I mentioned, Iowa's going to have over, it's like 102 million cells of data. And I'm guessing you probably don't want to query all those at once. So we're going to use all these different techniques to pare it down. I have a Missouri presentation come up in the near future. That's why that record there is for Missouri. You may not want Texas or California data files, but if you do, those will have to be split between 3 separate access files because access is not capable of handling as much data as contained in the Texas and California files. And if you just want data for Iowa, you'll be good to go. If you're going to process data for multiple states for some reason, copy or download the access table and rename that file based upon each of your states. Okay, so my plan here for this live demo we're going to do for you. I have already downloaded the 5 files that we talked about. I'm going to import the geographic header file into Microsoft Access. I'm going to create a query to extract only the data I want, and then I'll export the results to Excel. Not ready for questions yet. So here is our Microsoft Access shell. What I have already done for this demonstration is imported the file, but I'll walk you through it so you can see how it goes. It takes, these are big files. It takes a few moments to do that. So to avoid any kind of a problem during the import on a live demonstration, I went ahead and imported it. But I'll show you how it's done. It's actually pretty straightforward. Go up to external data. I'm going to click that. This is an older version of Access on my home computer here, so your version of this ribbon might be a little bit different. But I'm going to get some external data, this text file format. Now, one of the things I didn't demonstrate was that here's my geographic file. I've unzipped it. I've renamed it .txt. So you're going to want to do that before you get into Access and try to import it. Okay, there's my geographic file. I'm going to open that. Now, you go down to the second option here, append a copy of the records to the table. You want to click that radio button, and your 4 tables are listed there. And this data is the geographic header, so you want to select that. It is super, super critical that you get the right table for the file that you're importing. You'll get complete disaster if you don't. And the problem is with some of this data, since it's all numbers, you might have difficulty figuring out that you've actually done that. One thing I want to tell everybody, I am not a Microsoft Access expert at all. I've learned enough to do enough for this demonstration. There may be easier ways for you to do it. If you know that, I implore you to use it, but I don't, so I'm going to walk through this process. And this, again, is the same process demonstrated on the video and in that how-to shell guide. So here's our preview of the data. Remember, it was pipe delimited. So we go up and click on delimited. We'll click next. And there's no pipe option here. So we click on other. And here's where I hit shift in that bar to get the pipe. And you can see the preview pops up now trying to format the data for you in the right format using that delimiter. You click on next. And I have already imported this, so I'm not going to do it live here. But you would click finish, and the data from that file gets imported into the 2020 PL Geo header. If I did that now, of course, I'd get 2 copies of the data, which I don't want. But if we click on this table, here is our data. Now there's lots of cells of data, and not all these cells will actually have data in them. As you scroll across, you'll see quite a few blanks over here, blank fields. If you scroll down, I won't scroll down through all of it here, but the fields will eventually be populated for certain records, but not all records. And that's why it's critical to be able to pinpoint exactly what it is you want to get. This field, log rec no, the logical record number, this is the number that links to the other files, that file 1, file 2, and file 3. So this record, the first record here, happens to be for the state of Iowa. Logical record number 1, you can look that up in these other 3 files and see the data for that particular record number. I'll demonstrate how those are linked together here in just a bit. Let me scroll across. If you're going to map this to one of the census geography files, you're going to have a geocode. And the geocode is the link, the connection between the shape files and our data. So that part is important to get. In my example today, I'm just going to pull out population and housing unit counts for the cities in Iowa as my first example. So we'll continue to look through the data. I happen to know I've been through this many times. I got to go way out here to the right. And here I get the name of the entity associated with that record. And I continue on out and I see POP 100 and HU 100. This is the population count from the 2020 census. This is the housing unit count. So the 100 is kind of a legacy file name or field name, but for our purposes, it gives you the population and housing unit count for those records. Okay, let's do a query. I'm just going to do it the easy way here. I'll click on Query Design, and I'm querying the 2020 Geo header file. So I'm going to add that and then close it. And if you're not all that familiar with Access, hopefully you'll see how I can jump back and forth between reviewing the data and changing my query to get something just a little bit different that I might want. Geocode, we decided we wanted that. All right, scroll down near the bottom, we had the name and POP 100 and HU 100. And I'm just clicking on those. As I click on them, they appear at the bottom of the screen here. So my query is going to come up with just these 4 fields and they'll be populated if I click on the run button in the upper right. Okay, geocodes, population, and the name of the entity. But in doing so, I got 247,000 records. If I scroll on down just to quickly look at some of the names, there's congressional districts, townships, parts of townships. Some of the township might be in a city, some might be out. There's a separate record for each part of the township, the part that's in the city, the part that's out. So you can see how this is going to be very confusing unless we use our summary level to pare it down. Here's voting districts in here and so forth. So we want to pare it down using our summary level. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to click on in the upper left, I'm going to click on my design view. And that lets me get back into my query and make a change here. Well, if you remember, we talked about SumLev, summary level. And that's the piece that will start to give us a little more sense to our file here. If you remember, 160 was the summary level for places or cities. So if I add the summary level field and I put in a 160, and then I do a run, now we see the cities in Iowa, just the cities. There's some CDP, census designated places, if you're not familiar with them. And note that we now have, instead of 240-some thousand records, we have 1,028 records, which kind of makes sense because there's about 1,000 cities in Iowa, right? So this is how you get to the information for the cities. Now, what if I wanted to do, let me grab my trusty sheet here. Maybe you want to do census tract. I look up the summary level for census tract and I see 140. Then go back and click on design view. Take out my 160, simply enter 140, click on run, and there are my census tract values. Okay, these are the census tracts for the entire state. Okay, for all counties. If you want to do one just for your county, can we do that? You bet you we can. Here's county, a county field. Now these county fields, this county field is the FIPS county codes for your particular counties. So hopefully you all know that. I'll just pick 153, which is Polk County, and click on run. Okay, now I've paired my census tract data set down to 112 records, which comprise the 112 census tracts within Polk County. Come back up to design view. If you want to look at blocks, every individual block in Polk County, going back to my summary level document, 750 was my summary level for blocks. And we'll click run again. And there's the geocode for each block. There's a spelling of the name, block 1000 in this particular case, and the population housing unit for each of the blocks. Now, if you know blocks, blocks are, numbers are unique within census tract. And census tract number is embedded here. But you can also go back and add the census tract field. It's called just track. I just double clicked on that, click run. So now I have the track number, make it a little bit easier to perhaps define the block that I'm interested in Polk County here. Now, if you want to export this, let's say I want to export it to a spreadsheet. Again, you all probably know this better than I do, but you save the query. Appears over here on the left side. You just right click, export, and to Excel. That really depends on how you plan to use the data. That's up to you to decide what you want to do with the data at this point. If you're really familiar with Access, comfortable using it, you just might stay in Access and grab the data you want. In my particular function, what I'm going to do for my staff in my office is to export it to a spreadsheet, a little bit easier for them to go in quickly and review this and some other data that I have for our cities, and easier for those people to use Excel. But you can do, obviously a variety of things with it as well. Now the segment 1, segment 2, segment 3 files I have already imported. Okay, so what I'm going to do is display one of those for you. So I just double clicked on my table, and here's logical record number 1. Remember we talked about that a minute ago. This is the record in segment 1, file 1 for the state of Iowa. And here are the field names. Now, unless you're a real census data geek, you don't know what these fields mean. I'm in that category. I don't know what these fields mean. But that's why we have the technical documentation available to you. And what you'll find is that P001 represents table 1. Table 1 was race data. So this first column is the first field in that table, which I think if you look it up, is the total population. Again, it's the same population from the previous table, but it's a total population, so you can do calculations within this particular data set. But the technical documentation will tell you what field 2, field 3, field 4, field 5, and all the way across the line. And I'm scrolling across here. It's probably a blur, but definitely once you get the understanding that the technical documentation is going to be your friend, you pull it out and identify the fields that you want, and select just the fields of data. And you have this very similar looking information in segment file 2, the file 2 table, and the file 3 table. You can see this number isn't for logical record number 1, the Iowa. This is not the same as the population. So it's telling you something else is going on there. You have to go find out what this table stands for, and it adds up what's over here to the right in the additional fields. Now, to show you how these things can be linked, the Census Bureau provided some queries, and we see those listed here at the bottom, these example queries. So what I'm going to do is I'll click on the county one here. And what this particular query did was it pulled out the counties in Iowa. There's the name of your counties here. And it pulled out all the fields of data. Let me stop here with this file ID line right here. So everything to the left of this particular column, everything to the left is from the geographic header file. So they went into the geographic header file. They wanted counties. Counties are SUMLEV 050 from your frequently used SUMLEV document. And they wanted Geocode, GeoID, which is a different version of Geocode. The Geocode is the one I'm after. The name of the entity, what they call the base name, so they take out county or city or village, whatever the name is. They just provide the base name for that particular entity. And then they linked it to every single record, every single column, I should say, in the data segment 2. So if you're going across here, here's the first tables, table 3, column 1, table 3, column 2, and so forth. Now the cool thing is if you go back here to design view, is you'll see these things a little bit more graphically here. It kind of lays this thing out for you. The common field here is the logical record number, log recno. And what this query has done is linked all 4 of these data tables together based upon the logical record number. And now you can go in and select individual fields that you want, do your queries based upon what SUMLEV you want, and go from there. So here we had counties, that's 50. Let's do something a little bit different. Let's try voting district, which was 700. So now this is the data in table 2, or excuse me, table 3 for every voting district in the state of Iowa. Okay. I don't know if it's, hope this made sense to everybody. What I'm going to go ahead and do is go back and we'll open it up to questions. You can certainly ask them now, and I can go back and demonstrate anything else. We certainly have time for that. But with that, I'll open it up to questions. I don't know if I can read them off the chat here or not. What is the user-friendly format is one of the questions that come up. So let me back up on what it is I've got here. This is the legacy file format, right? This was just this ASCII table, and it was kind of a secondary planned release of census data. The big planned release was the data.census.gov site. And that was a very user-friendly web-based system that you could go in and do your selections, do your queries. For the redistricting data folks, the people at the state level that receive this data, I think there's some additional data pieces, some software, some DVDs that are provided to them as part of this release. So that is a user-friendly format that's going to be in this data.census.gov site. You can go to the census website now in the quick facts system and look up the 2020 census population counts for most, not most, let's say many places throughout the country. The quick facts has a limit of population. So if it's 5,000 people or less, it will not appear on the quick facts. They will have to wait until the data.census.gov release data September, or go through this process like I demonstrated, or call somebody who can go through that for you. Yeah, there's a question. I guess somebody's looked at some of the 2020 census data. They had some questions about the counts, I guess. There is a program planned for next year called the Count Question Resolution Program. It's a program we've had for after every census I've been involved with. CQR is the name of it. In December of this year, we will mail out notices of the program to the highest elected officials in Iowa, in of course the highest elected officials of cities, counties, the state, and the tribal lands as well. So we'll announce the program. It's a voluntary program. It's a free program for participants, but there's a process in place to ask the Census Bureau to go back and review certain information from the census. I want to be clear here, the census data collection process has ended. So there's no new data collected as a result of the CQR submissions that are provided to us. We'll go back out and we'll look at allocations of housing units. If somebody had an annexation to their city that they forgot to submit to us, that was in effect before January 1st of 2020, we will take that new annexation and we'll produce new census counts for them as a result of that. And the end result of CQR, if your counts were found to be in error, the Census Bureau will release Errata Documents, or what we call it. A letter goes to the highest elected officials saying, here's the new count from the 2020 census. Bear in mind, though, that the apportionment is done. The determination of how many seats each state gets in the House of Representatives is done. So any changes that come about through CQR do not change apportionment. The redistricting data provided to the states has been provided as of this data set release and, of course, the end of September. So we don't go back and change those records. These revised counts will be used for future operations such as population estimates. So just bear that in mind. Do you know when the 2020 data will be available in the new ESRI redistricting app? I don't. I think I heard a ESRI rep might be on the line. He might know the answer to that. Joe Sikorsky, are you there? And he might be muted. Oh, I got to scroll down and read. Here's the answer on the data being available in the chat window on data for ESRI redistricting. Looks like the first half of September is the answer to the question there. Okay, somebody indicated they had a problem with the extra dot. And that's, whatever whatever you end up getting to work for you when you rename the file it works. I had success just going the .txt. I also have done, like you said, I dropped the PL, just put txt, and the file imported directly. So yeah, I was actually having a problem on a different platform, so maybe that's what I need to look into for that. Yeah, actually, I'm actually using a newer version of Microsoft Access when I encountered a strange error. I'll investigate, see if that was the problem. Obviously, with this older version that I've got on my home computer, I didn't have that issue. So questions are still rolling in, folks. There's still time. Well, if not, no more questions. I guess I can turn it back to Micah, and thank you all for your attendance today. Any questions come up later, of course, you're welcome to call me or email me at craig.dwayne.best@census.gov. My phone, I'm in the process of transitioning from one office to another, so I don't have a phone identified at this point. So don't call me. The best way to get a hold of me is to email me, and I think you'll find I'm very responsive if you call. So with that, I guess it's back to Micah. I saw an extra thing pop up here. The auditor forwarded me an email from the Secretary of State's office that said the state had procured a technology solution to assist cities and counties with the precincting and redistricting process. Does anybody know about that? I don't. Obviously, I'm not in redistricting, but I think that's a state question or a county's question if anybody knows anything about it. Micah or Josh?
They must have their mouths full at the moment. I'm the current chair of IGIC, and I want to thank you so much for the extremely timely and helpful. I took lots of notes and lots of screenshots, and I now have more confidence that I'll be able to get through this process and onward to the redistricting. So a lot of grateful people out here right now.
No, thank you. That's what I'm here for.
Well, I can tell you've given this a time or two. It was smooth.
Yeah, thanks, James, one of my old coworkers there. Yeah, actually, 20 years ago, after the 2000 census, this data format was first released. At that time, I started presentations on how to use it at that time. So a little bit familiar with it. It helps that they don't change much from decade to decade, I guess. That's why they call it the legacy format.
For some of us, this is our first redistricting attempt, so.
Sure. I understand. I sympathize with you. I don't understand because I don't.
It's a little overwhelming.
I'm sure. I am sure.
A document with 4 links, and each one of those takes you to a page with 20 links, and you get a little freaked out right off the bat.
Yes.
Okay, people. Well, we'll let everybody go and finish your lunch.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks again, guys.
Attending another highly successful Lunch and Learn. If you have any ideas on future Lunch and Learns, please contact any IGIC member, and that information will get to us, and we'll try to keep this as timely and helpful as this one was.